I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, I think that there's absolutely some crossover. I mean, we did a report at Hope Not Hate with CST last year about a group called Keep Talking in the United Kingdom, which attracted people from the far left and from the far right to talk about conspiracies around the Rothschilds, banking systems, Palestine, or distortions of Palestine, should I say. And I think there is a crossover. What I would say is that I think there is, well, when I've looked at the research we've done around anti-Semitism on the left, I think it's an enormous problem. When it comes to the Holocaust, there you see much more Holocaust distortion. You see distortion of the facts, and it says seeking to use the Holocaust to undermine the legitimacy of the state of Israel and the historical record around that. And it's often kind of downplaying the Holocaust. It's saying that it's just one of many, etc., denying the historical uniqueness of the Holocaust. What we see on the alt-right is much more either the outright denial of the historical record or the existence of the Holocaust, or a celebration of the death of Jews. And generally speaking, although I won't say never, of course, the Holocaust, the distortion and anti-Semitism you see on the left is in a slightly different form from that. It's not about the celebration of the death of Jews. It's very much primarily tied into discussions around Israel and the creation of the state of Israel, etc. So it's downplaying the Holocaust. I don't think that's necessarily any better, but I think that there is a difference there. There are spaces online where you see a crossover, and I think the kind of pandemic has been mentioned, and a lot of the COVID conspiracy explosion, we've seen this explosion of engagement with conspiracy content in the last 12 months online, and lots of it around lockdowns, COVID, 5G towers, etc. And one of the things I'm really worried about is we're seeing this emergence or increased route of a new radicalization pathway, really. And the way we would normally watch people end up at Holocaust denial was through the far right. You'd see people, I'm talking about far right denial, not left wing, I guess, or not certainly some of the stuff we see in the Middle East, but you'd see people come into more moderate sides of the far right, and they would work their way through those until they got increasingly anti-Semitic and engaging with increasingly far right and increasingly Holocaust denial groups. What we've seen in the last year is people coming into conspiracy theory groups about 5G on Facebook, or lockdown, anti-lockdown or anti-mask groups, and people saying there's actually a super conspiracy here, where all of this is being controlled by a much more omnipotent, pernicious super being, invariably the Jews, of course. And so this route towards anti-Semitism via anti-lockdown, rather than say via the far right. And we've got lots of examples which we're really worried about individuals saying, well, now you can't trust the official narrative on COVID. You've got to realize you've got to open your mind to all of these historical truths. And seeing people push content that venerates Hitler or denies the Holocaust in conspiracy groups. So when it comes to crossover with left and right, the anti-lockdown and the conspiracy scene is not a far-right movement. Lots of far-right people are in it. But when you go on the demonstrations, they're from across the political spectrum, all sorts of backgrounds, etc. And so the route towards anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial comes from around the political spectrum there. And that's one thing that's really worrying, I think.